The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. This is the United Podcast Network.
The following program is closed captioned for the thinking impaired.
By tomorrow, I will rule the world!
You think he's gone? He's not gone. That's the whole point. He's never gone.
Is this some radical new therapy?
You see?
Well, I must have not been paying attention when you were just
Here we are again.
Let's give this one more shot.
Yeah.
Why not? I hear you ran into Melbourne Taylor the other day.
I did. Well, over Christmas I did. Yes. Let me jump it down. I did. We were doing at the Warp and Weft.
Okay.
No, sorry, not the Warp and Weft. I beg your pardon. The Worthen Attic.
The Worthen.
Yeah, we did a Christmas show.
That's
the
song that we play at the end of the show.
Yeah.
I love that. I actually love that song more than I love the opening song.
And there was a Christmas Merry Texmas show at the Worthen, thrown by some good friends of mine. Lots of local musicians. We had a really good time. And yeah, Mel and I got to run into each other.
That's
very
awesome.
briefly.
Did you guys, talk about me?
Yes.
You did?
He
Excellent.
asked how you were, and I said you were doing, and under the current circumstances, you're doing as well as you can be. Said to give you his best, and I gave him yours.
We got to get him in here with his guitar one day. I don't even care if we only have one viewer. I want him in here with his guitar.
Well, he was on his way out as I was on stage, so we only got to talk briefly, but I said it was finally great to meet him. I've been listening to this song for how many years now?
Right, yeah.
And we're both local, but we'd never run into each other.
I think it was 22 years ago. I did the math yesterday. Can you pull me up a little?
Sure.
I think it was 22 years ago. He walked into my show on WCAP live. He just walked in. I was in the middle of talking about, taxes or something. And he walks in with his guitar and he goes, "Hey, I wrote a song for your show." And I thought he was full of shit. I thought he was just saying that so he could get on the air.
Yeah.
And he walks in and he started playing this song. And I'm like, "Get the F out of town. You wrote this for my show?" He goes, better than that. And he pulled out a CD and said, "I put it on my album, put it on my record." I was like, wow, now I've hit the big time.
Yeah.
All right, maybe we should get this show on the road. I'm still waiting on Lenny, but whatever. It's my fault he's late, so I can't even blame him.
How dare you?
Hi, how you guys doing? My name's Tom Duggan. Here at the Paying Attention podcast for my friend Katie Leclerc. Hi atop, two guys smoke shop at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. Let's quickly thank our sponsors, which I started getting into the habit of doing that during the song to save time on the show.
Sorry, I
but
talked.
We are so off our game today. But sometimes those are the best shows.
I think
sometimes when I come in and everything's just total chaos, I have no idea what's happening.
Hey.
Those are the shows that end up having the highest ratings. So
We pretend it's me today, but...
Right. And
you had a flat tire.
I did have a flat tire. I was shocked by that. And whenever I have a flat tire, whenever something like that happens, my mind always goes to someone had to have slashed my tire, because I do have hood booger enemies out there that would do such things, right?
Yes.
But I don't think that was it. But thank God for Cody's Towing, which is Cody's mechanic, right next door to my office. I walked over. He was just getting back from lunch, and I'm like, "I got a flat." He goes, "I'll get you to the podcast on time, Tom, I promise." And then I tried to throw him like $50. Just because he's always doing stuff for me for free when that happens, and he wouldn't take it. So thank you to Mr. Cody at Cody's, I don't know if it's Cody's Service Station. I think that's the official name of it, on Main Street in North Andover, for getting me here on time. Century 21 McLennan Real Estate, the Zanny Pesci Law Office, Jana Zanny Pesci, the sexiest woman alive. Pay attention today. We've got a story for you. I know you're very upset about the MBTA Communities Act and the fact that Nick DeZoglio sold us out for his buddies at the Lieutenant General, blah, blah, blah. This is what the whole show's going to go like this. The Lieutenant Governor, sold out to the Lieutenant Governor, who made phone calls. So I know Methuen is going to have this big issue. They've rammed low-income housing down your throats in Methuen. We're going to talk about that a little today. We're actually going to talk about the North Andover issue, but does parallel to what's going on in Methuen. So Jana, make sure you watch today's show. Marsan and Son Construction. Ronnie Marsan also on the same side with Jana, I believe, on that one. So thank you to him. EIS, Investigation and Gun Training. Boy, let me tell you, those guys. When you ask those guys to go and surveil people, follow them around and get video, they're like at 4 o'clock in the morning. They were giving me videos last week of somebody, and I was like, holy crap. So the EIS Investigation Gun Training is the best. Bonfire Wellness Center, Tomo and Shaken Seafood, Clear Path for Veterans, New England. Do not ever give a dime to a nonprofit that says they care about veterans if it's not run by veterans. I'm going to say that again. Do not ever give a dime to a nonprofit that helps veterans if it's not run by veterans. We have a nonprofit in Lawrence, actually Lawrence and Methuen, that's in a lot of trouble right now. And we're going to talk about that in subsequent shows. I've been handcuffed. I can't talk about it, but I will very soon. So if you're going to give money to anybody to help veterans, it should be Clear Path for Veterans New England. And if you do, let's say you give them a $100 donation. That entire $100 goes directly to help a homeless veteran or to help feed a veteran or to help pay for rent for a veteran because they get grants from the government to pay for their overhead. So 100% of what you donated will go directly to a veteran. Clear Path for Veterans New England. AFC Urgent Care, Pleasant Valley Landscaping Contractors, Prime Insurance, the Doug Mercurio Law Office. A free shout out to my good friend Paul Lambert of Lambert and Randone in Lawrence. They do wills and trusts and all kinds of stuff like that. Chris's Barbershop in Salem, New Hampshire. W3ON and our buddy John Amano at Stadium Chiropractic. Got a bunch of things I want to talk about today. So I guess I've touched off quite the firestorm. I've got half of my readers are absolutely furious with me right now. It's all stuffed up today. I've got the other half of my readers, my followers, are absolutely thrilled about what I've been doing on Facebook the last 24 hours because it is with the wind chill factor between 0 and 2 degrees last night. And we have people who are living on the streets who are homeless. In a Democrat-run city of Lawrence, which is run 100% by Democrats. In the state of Massachusetts, which is 100% run by Democrats. And yet at election time, Maura Healey and the Lieutenant Governor, Ed Markey, Elizabeth Warren, all of these Democrats run for office telling you that Republicans are evil, that Republicans don't care about the poor, that Republicans don't care about the downtrodden, that Republicans are only there to help their rich friends. And yet, the reality on the ground is the exact opposite. That's not my political opinion. Drive around Lawrence right now. Get wherever you are, get in your car, drive around Lawrence for 5 minutes, and look at all the homeless people on the streets in this weather. Last night, there were upwards of 300 people sleeping on the streets in Lawrence. And I shouldn't say on the streets because they're not on the streets. They're in parks. They're mostly on the banks of the Merrimack River. They're in Denrock Park. They're along the rail trail where the railroad tracks are that go from Lawrence through Methuen up into New Hampshire. So they're not technically on the streets at night. They're sleeping in tents on the banks of the Merrimack River. In the richest country on the planet, in the history of man. We are the richest country on the planet in the history of man. And Democrats are the ones who tell you that they care about the poor. They care about the downtrodden. They're the ones, if you elect them, that are going to stop those evil Republicans from taking money away from the poor. Well, let me ask you this. Where the fuck were they last night? Where were they? Because the TMF outreach team was bringing hot cocoa and blankets and sternos and hand warmers and sweaters and whatever they could to the people that were on the streets of Lawrence. And where were the Democrats who at election time asked you for a donation and asked you for a vote? I'll tell you where they were. They were home in their heated apartments or homes under a heated blanket, sipping latte and doing selfies going, changing the world. Yeah, that's what they were doing last night. While people were literally freezing to death. A little kerfuffle in the studio here. And it infuriates me. It infuriates me to begin with. It infuriates me to begin with that we have homeless in the richest country in the world when we have money to send to Ukraine, we have money to send to Saudi Arabia, we have money to send to Egypt and Brazil and Jordan and every other country on the flipping globe. And yet we don't use it to help our own American citizens who are addicted to drugs that our government allows to come across the border, facilitates coming across the border to poison them. They do nothing for these people. And yet they create this fantasy illusion that because they're Democrats, they care about the poor. And it's infuriating to me that it's even happening. But it infuriates me even more that they have the gall to look you in the eye at election time and tell you they care about the poor. You know, I've mentioned this on the show a number of times. I'm going to get to our guest. I've mentioned this a couple of times on my show. When Elizabeth Warren decided to declare she was going to run for president, she flew in, drove in a limo through Lawrence. I followed her limo. She came into Lawrence, and she drove by no less than half a dozen homeless people holding signs on Merrimack Street, South Union Street, then Union Street, over to the Mill Building where she gave her speech that she was going to run. And when she got up, all you saw behind her in Lawrence, which is 90% Latino, there's maybe 5% white people in Lawrence, but she's in Lawrence. And behind her on the stage, don't believe me, Google this. Go to YouTube and Google this. She stands up when she's announcing she's running for president. And you know who's standing behind her? All her white, liberal, rich friends from Andover and North Andover are standing behind her. One or two Latino smatterings in the crowd to make it look good. And you know who those people were? Those were rich Latinos that were elected officials that were looking to get jobs if she wins. Then, when she was done, because I sat outside the rally when it was happening. It was a Saturday afternoon. When she was done, she got back in her limo. She drove past the same homeless people back out of the city. And we haven't seen her since. When she wanted to vote, when she wanted to run for office, when she wanted to grandstand about how much she cared about the poor, she came to Lawrence, and she used you people as a prop. Those of you who live in Lawrence, she used you as a prop. You guys vote 9-1 for Democrats every time they run for office. This is what you get. This is what you get. Nobody knows the frustration that I have today about the way we treat the homeless than the guy who's sitting to my left, my guest today, former state representative Lenny Mirra, because even though he's an evil Republican, he's one of the few people in the legislature who actually tried to do something about this, and the Democrats wouldn't let him. Thank you, Lenny, for being here, my friend.
Thank you, Tom Duggan,
Always
for
good to
having me
have
on
you.
the air. Love doing your show with you.
By the way, you are the highest-rated show of all time.
Let's do that again.
We were the highest rated. We did our
That was a
year-end
good show.
review, and it was literally the highest, almost 64,000 audio downloads
Wow.
that day. Yeah, it was crazy.
Incredible.
Yeah. Well, I guess people really love Kelly Frazier, so.
Well, you know what, Tom? I came here thinking you do shows and talk about subjects that you're not going to hear anywhere else. You can't get this news in any newspaper or any other radio show, TV show, anywhere else. I mean, some come close. You know, Howie Carter does a great job. But other than that, you can't get information like this. You can't get this kind of analysis anywhere else on any other news.
Flattery will get you everywhere here.
No, you know, Tom, and I hate to say this, as dire as you made the situation sound, it's actually far worse than you're making it sound. Because, you know, this state keeps making the same old promises over and over again. Pass one more tax. Let's pass one more program. Do one more thing, and that will fill in the blank. It'll fix education, transportation.
It's going to stop global warming. If we just pay more taxes, we're going to stop global warming.
Oh, it's one thing after another, and especially with this issue on homelessness. They've been talking about homelessness, and I'm going to bring up something else, income inequality and wealth inequality for how many years now? For as long as we can remember.
Right.
And Massachusetts has one of the worst records in America when it comes to all those things.
Right.
When it comes to homelessness and when it comes to inequality. One of the worst records anywhere. And our politicians, who, as you reminded us, are entirely in one party, completely in the bag for one party. Power has been consolidated to a tiny number of people on Beacon Hill. You've got the governor, the speaker, the Senate president. They run everything, okay? And the meetings...
Ask Diana DeZoglio.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
And they're turning on her.
Right.
Shamefully turning on her.
Yeah.
Not just them, but the Attorney General's office is circling the wagons with the legislature to shut out people like Diana DeZoglio who are trying to do the right thing.
Right.
And, you know, it's coming to a head right now because people in Massachusetts are opening their real estate tax bills, and jaws are dropping to the floor, and people are pissed. And rightfully so. They should be pissed. We just passed a millionaire's tax, remember? And what do they call it? The Fair Share Amendment, right? Okay, so the legislature made that happen by changing the Constitution to allow a graduated income tax so that the quote-unquote rich can quote-unquote pay their fair share.
Right.
And once they do that, they said, oh, it'll bring in $1 billion a year, and they promise, quote unquote, promise to spend it on education and transportation, right?
Right.
That was the big promise.
Just like the cigarette tax was going to go to people with emphysema.
Oh, remember that whole thing?
Yeah, and that went into the general fund and they blew it.
Well, the same thing happened here. The good news is that millionaires tax brought in way more than $1 billion. It was like $1.8 billion. So that should be good news for homeowners, right? Because now our real estate taxes should not be going up as much. They shouldn't go up at all.
Right.
Because
I didn't think of that. They made more money on the billionaires tax.
Absolutely.
So our taxes should go down, right?
Exactly. Or at least stay the same, stay level funded, right? Because
They went. So they would. Did they go down? Did they?
skyrocketing. Tax bills are skyrocketing
Wait a
in every
minute.
city and town.
How is that possible?
Yeah, exactly. How is it possible? They promised, didn't they promise to spend this money on education?
Well, maybe
and
we got to fix
transportation?
global warming.
Yeah, if we do
Maybe
that, then
if-
automatically the right problems go
If
away.
only we paid more taxes, global warming would stop tomorrow.
Well, I'm just telling you that, the biggest contentious issue on Beacon Hill is when it comes to spending is this Chapter 70 money. Now, Chapter 70 is the money the state gives to cities and towns to fund education.
Right.
And the way the formula is concocted is, the big cities that have a poor record and do a terrible job get rewarded.
Right.
And the small cities and towns that, do the right thing, pay their taxes, they get shafted. And that's what's happening here every single year. So Haverhill and Lawrence are experiencing huge windfalls in Chapter 70, all sorts of money. I think in Lawrence, pretty much the entire school system is paid for by the state.
Yeah, 100%.
Just about 100%.
85% of the entire city budget is paid for by the state and federal
There
government.
you go. And right next door in Boxford, it's the opposite, where 90% is funded by the residents of Boxford themselves, and the state only gives about 10%.
Right.
And it wasn't supposed to be this way. When we passed that millionaire's tax, that money was supposed to go to education and transportation, and it was supposed to alleviate the tax bill for homeowners. And by the way, it's not just education. The legislature and Maura Healey is saying, you know what, we got to start funding the MBTA. Well, again, where's all this money from the millionaire's tax, the fair share amendment?
What is that?
Where is it going? Where is it going? And Healy's calling for more regular funding for...
Do you hear music?
I do hear music.
No, I hear music. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. But long story short, again...
Maybe it's your phone. No? All right,
no, it
good.
wasn't
Sorry,
me.
good.
That's not my ringtone.
Sorry, I apologize.
That's okay.
You were on such a groove, and I screwed it up for you.
I was on a rant, and I apologize for ranting. But you know what, Tom? The taxpayers of the state should be pissed.
It never goes. But I like to go back to the cigarette tax because I smoked when they did that. We're gonna increase the cigarette tax another $2 a pack, and if you just let us do this, we promise it's going to go to a separate fund to help the victims of the evil tobacco companies.
That's right.
Who got people addicted. And I thought, I don't like more taxes. I certainly don't want to pay more for cigarettes. But if it's going to help people with emphysema, how do you complain about that? But that's why they lie to you that way when they want something. So you can't complain about it. And then literally, they implemented the tax on July 1st. And by September, they raided the fund, put it into the general fund, and frickin' spent it all. Not a dime of it went to people with emphysema.
No.
Not a dime of it went to people that have lung problems because of cigarettes. I think people should go to jail if they take your money under false if I took your money, if I told you, when you own a construction company, if you went to a homeowner and said, I'm going to build you a deck, you got to give me $10,000, and they gave you $10,000 and you went to the Bahamas with it, you would go to jail. But the politicians can say, give us money for this and we promise we'll use it for that. And then the minute they get the money, they blow it on something else, and then you guys just friggin' reelect them. Lawrence, I always say Lawrence is the microcosm for the country, certainly for the state, because every single social experiment starts in Lawrence. They always go to Lawrence where nobody pays attention to what's going on, and they always use Lawrence, people of Lawrence like the guinea pigs, and they do all these things. And so when you look at Lawrence, you go, they vote overwhelmingly Democrat in Lawrence. And all these politicians jet in at election time. I told you about Elizabeth Warren. Healy did the same thing. Went to Pavel Payano headquarters. They all posed for a photo op like Angelina Jolie had just shown up. She's a celebrity. Everybody wants to be seen with power. They all do their selfies. Then the elected officials screw the hell out of Lawrence. They give us crumbs after the election to make it look good. But they never do anything to fix the frickin' problem.
No, it's go along to get along. Here's the problem. Not only is power on Beacon Hill, all in one party, it's very much concentrated on just a handful of people.
Right.
And so the state.
But that's how communism works.
It's exactly
communism
how it works.
is one party rule, because once you get to one party rule, now all the power gets concentrated. It's like a pyramid scheme up to the top of that pyramid.
You see that in China, the Soviet Union, everywhere where communism takes place, and it's one party rule, and they consolidate it right to the top.
Right.
So in the House of Representatives, Mariano, the Speaker of the House, pretty much dictates everything that happens in this state.
Right.
Okay, because it's 90% Democrat in the House, and every one of those Democrats is pretty much bought and paid for. There's a few brave hearts that will stand up to the Speaker.
But they pay a heavy price.
They're thrown in the basement. They got an office next to a water heater.
Right.
Okay, they get the Desaglio treatment.
Right.
That's what happens.
Right.
It's what happens. And so they know this. So as soon as they're elected, they start learning how the game is played. You keep your mouth shut. You go along to get along. You do whatever Mariano says, and you will get one of these phony baloney positions, a title, some sort of division leader that does nothing.
Triple your salary.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
what people don't understand.
Those titles comes with raises $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 on top of your base pay.
Yep.
And not only does it affect your base pay, it'll affect your pension for the rest of your life. And all you're going to do is play ball.
Right. So when the legislature took the vote to spend $1 billion with a B, $1 billion on illegal friggin' aliens in Massachusetts, I called all of my state rep friends in the Merrimack Valley, all my state rep friends in Lawrence, Methuen, North Andover, and Drake, and I called them all and I said this: I know you as a person. Off the record, off the air, we go out to lunch, we talk. You're not for any of this bullshit. You're against spending money on illegal aliens. You're against all of this. You want to send them all home. You're afraid to say it out loud because of the Democrat Party and you're a Democrat. But how did you put your name on that bill?
Right.
How did you go up there and vote yes? And every single one of them, to the person, they didn't say it exactly the same way I'm about to say it, but I'm going to paraphrase what they all told me. Tom, if we don't go along, we don't get committee assignments. If we don't get committee assignments, we don't get chairmanships. And with chairmanships, we can double our pay. So I can go from paying my mortgage to not paying my mortgage if I don't vote the right way. So my question was, especially to the Lawrence reps, then what do we need you for? When you run against so-and-so, you're both Democrats in a primary. Why should anybody vote for you over the other guy if you're both just going to vote the exact same fucking way? You're both going to vote the exact same fucking way, whether I vote for you, whether I vote for Estella Reyes or Jim McCarty, whether I vote for Marcos Devers or Francisco Polino, whether I vote for Ryan Hamilton or whoever runs against Ryan Hamilton. Why should I support you if you're going to vote the exact same way they're going to vote? You're all going to just stand in line and do what the speaker tells you. What's the advantage of having you?
That's exactly.
And not one of them could give me an answer.
No.
So I said, listen, the next time election time comes up in 2 years, don't be surprised if I'm not standing with you. Don't be surprised if you're not on the podcast. Don't be surprised if I'm not taking your calls. Because if you're going to stand with them, I'm going to stand with the public. I'm going to stand with the voters. They did not like that answer. They didn't like it. They were, Tom, why are you making this personal? I said, because there are people on the streets of Lawrence who are not illegal aliens, who are not living in luxury hotels right now. And those are the people who are your constituents, not the people that got here from Guatemala 20 minutes ago.
No, it's not personal. And you know what? If you really want to send a message to them, do to them what you did with me one day. When I was in office, you took me to a tent city on the side of the river. I couldn't believe it's in the dead of winter. And all I could think about last night is that wind was howling and the wind chill is like below zero.
Once you see it, it's hard not to think about that.
You cannot get that image out of your mind because there's people living under, tents, literally in tents and covered in newspapers while, we're in our homes all locked away. And this state is spending all these billions of dollars. They jump when these illegals came to Massachusetts. We rolled out the red carpet, gave them a place to stay, a hot meal 3 times a day, right? All the free health care and everything in the world. And it's amazing how our politicians just jump to service them, but won't do the same for our own residents.
Right.
And you've got people, not just in Lawrence, but there's also that famous area, Mass and Cass down in Boston. How in the world are illegals getting put up and given all these facilities for free when we have our own citizens who are still out there in a tent city somewhere, either at Mass and Cass or on the side of the river in Lawrence?
Yeah.
And how do they allow this to happen? Well, you just described it. It's one party and one person. Mariano can just simply decide, we're not going to stand for this. We're going to deport people here illegally, and we're going to use that money to help the citizens who are living on the side of the road.
But even he can't do it because he's not really in charge. It's the donors who are working for the drug cartels in China who funnel money into his campaign and tell him, this is the way you're going to vote. This is the way you're going to vote, or we're going to replace you and put you in jail like we did the last 3 speakers.
He gets plenty of money from perfectly legal businesses and residents in
Well,
Massachusetts.
but
He can choose
I don't know
to
that
do something
that's the
about
case.
this. He can, but I think he's just so far removed, Tom. I think he's so insulated from what's really happening on the streets that he doesn't really get it. And you know what? These politicians in Lawrence that you mentioned, it's up to them. It's their responsibility to go to the speaker, right?
Right.
And say, Mr. Speaker, this is what's happening
say
in
that
my
all the time.
backyard. We got to do something about this. So why aren't they doing it?
Yep.
Why? Because once again, they know if they keep their mouths shut, don't rock the boat, right? Don't upset the apple cart, I'm going to get a position. On the other hand, if I start bitching and complaining about homelessness in my district,
right?
Gee, now they're scratching their head saying, I might not get that
But
committee
here's what
chair.
they don't understand, and I say this to Estella all the time. I say it to Francisco all the time. I even say it to Frank Moran and Hamilton all the time. You guys actually have the power. You don't think you do, but you do. Because if you all
That's
stood
right.
together
Yes.
and you said, Lawrence isn't voting for Democrats anymore unless you give us what we're looking for. You work for us, not the other way around. The Democrats need that 9-1 win in Lawrence to offset the votes in North Andover,
Right.
Drayton, and all the suburbs that don't always vote traditionally Democrat. So that's why they need that 7-1, 9-1 win in Lawrence. If you stood against them and you said, listen, I'm with you on all this other stuff, but you've got to actually do something to make a difference here, or we're not going to support you. You watch how quickly Mr. Mariano he'd open an office on Essex Street and would be holding office hours to talk to Lawrence
Damn
constituents.
right he would. You just need someone with the spine to be able to do that. And by the
Right.
way, sometimes it happens in smaller increments. So the state rep from Bedford is Ken Gordon, and he did this because Spinelli's, which got a no-bid contract to supply food for these migrants, right? They discovered that the food was arriving uncooked, and people were getting sick eating the food. And regardless of who it's going to, if you're a contractor for the state and you're paid all this money on a no-bid contract to supply food, it ought to damn well be cooked, right?
Right.
And so this guy, Ken Gordon, he stood up and stood up to his leadership and said, look, you can't be doing this. And the Globe, God bless them, they finally did a story of this and discovered Spinelli's got this no-bid contract. Oh, by the way, guess what? The owners of Spinelli's donate heavily to, guess who? Mara
Right,
Healy
right.
and everyone else in leadership.
Right.
And that always happens with these no-bid contracts.
It always goes back, and I always go back to the whole Jim Jajuga thing, right? Not to pick a scab on an old wound, but he wanted to do away with state troopers doing construction jobs on the highways, right? And nobody could figure out why a former state trooper, a former director of public safety, would want to go into the Senate and say, let's get rid of state troopers doing construction on the highways. Come to find out, his wife set up a flagman business because they wanted to have civilian flagmen do it, and he was going to fucking make the money himself. It was going to go to his wife. So whenever you look at like these, like you said, these what they call no bid contracts, which means these contracts are not open for anybody. It goes to a political insider. It's a no bid, right? So you're right. All of these things, they say that they're going to help. But really, when they say they're going to help, what it means is they're going to help their donors or their friends make money on government, but it's not going to solve the problem because there's too much money being made on poverty. There's too much money being made on homelessness. There's too much money being made on addiction. Because if the Democrat Party tomorrow solved the homeless problem, which they could do, if they solved the addiction problem tomorrow, which they could do, what do they campaign on in 2 years?
There's a lot of,
What problem is there to fix, right? Why do we need them?
Yeah, they absolutely could fix this, and it's not like you need a whole bunch of Democrats. Like I said, the power's consolidated. You just need the key Democrats to do the right thing, right? And they always find a way to blame a Republican somewhere down in Washington. So when we closed, asylums that were taken and people that were mentally ill, of course, it wasn't the fault of the people here in Massachusetts that actually did that, like Dukakis. No, they found a way to blame Ronald Reagan or someone else that's 1,000
It's always
miles
that
away.
evil, abstract Republican.
Exactly.
It's always the evil white supremacists.
No, you don't need Reagan or now Donald Trump to fix this problem. Massachusetts can fix this problem on their own. They can. In fact, if you want to see a good example of it, look at those poor bastards out in California right now where the firefighters are dealing with, it looks like hell on earth. It really does. If you've seen the video, it is nightmarish. And they go to hook up a hose to a hydrant and no water's coming out of the hydrant. Well, whose fault is that now?
It's because of global warming, though. We had to save the water for global warming.
Telling you. Well, you know what? That place is completely dominated by Democrats, right? They spend huge amounts of tax, just like Massachusetts, and they border the largest ocean on the planet, right? So they could use that money for desalination plants, right? They could be doing that and turning ocean water into fresh water so it would be available for their agriculture, for firefighting, for residents.
But the thing is, it goes back to the Democrat Party is predicated on the fact that we have to exacerbate the problem, so we always need them. Because if they fix the problem, we wouldn't need them anymore, right? They put themselves out of a job, and they know that. And let's go back to the homeless for a minute. What was most infuriating about the $1 billion spent on illegal aliens? Let's forget that it's for illegal aliens. Let's pretend that it's actually people from California. They're actually American citizens. They come here, and Massachusetts wants to spend $1 billion on them. What does that actually tell us? What it tells us is that for the last 20 years, the Democrat Party that ran Massachusetts, and don't tell me Charlie Baker was a Republican, because he wasn't. The Democrats who completely controlled this state for 20 years prior, who told us they couldn't fix the homeless problem because there wasn't enough money. But they sure as hell found $1 billion to help people who came from other countries, didn't they? And what that told us is they had the ability all along to help American citizens on the streets of the cities of Massachusetts, Lawrence, Lowell, Worcester, Boston, Springfield, Holyoke, Taunton, all of these cities where all of these homeless addicts are, people who are American citizens who need help, who are victims of the drug cartels and the bastard doctors in the healthcare system who got them addicted on opioids before they had to go out and use heroin after they got taken off, right? They had the ability all along they had the ability to help these people, and they turned their backs on them pretending that they didn't. Because then when it became important to them, when illegal aliens came here and it became important to their political narrative, they magically found $1 billion with a B, $1 billion for someone else who just got here 20 minutes ago from Chechnya? Are you kidding me?
No, if they have to find $1 billion, they can find $1 billion.
Yeah, they
and keep
sure
in mind,
can.
that $1 billion they found, I think only covers shelter and housing costs. Right. But someone's paying for the food and clothing and healthcare and education, right? Because they're getting all of those things.
Right.
They come here with no money, so obviously someone's funding all of those things.
Right.
And when they get hurt or sick, they're showing up in an emergency. Guess what? Someone's paying for all that, right? Well, look in the mirror, taxpayer.
And the strain on our infrastructure, the sewer system, the infrastructure,
all of it.
The roads. I mean, come on.
If they had to find $1 billion, they can listen. When Baker left office, people forget we had a record amount in our rainy day fund. We had revenue coming in above projections, quarter after quarter after quarter, right? And we did that while lowering the tax rate. Let me remind you, we finally lowered the income tax to 5%, like the taxpayers demanded way back in 2000. Okay, it took 20 years, but we did it. And revenues were coming in hand over fist. So if they have to find the money, they can find the money.
Right.
But it's just a matter of priorities. And I just don't get how people here illegally are the priority over seniors, veterans, mentally ill people who need our help and can obviously get this help, and they're not getting it.
But even after all of that, they still voted for Maura Healey over the Republican because Republicans are evil white supremacists who want to take our abortions away. They won't let us kill our babies. They're going to take our abortions. So we don't care if they lie to us. We don't care if they steal billions of dollars. We don't care if American citizens are sleeping on the streets in sub-zero temperatures. As long as we get to kill our babies, they can lie to us to our face so we can feel good about the fact that we voted for them. That's okay.
Well, can we make an admission here, though? Let's come full circle.
Sure.
And, I'm a registered Republican here in Massachusetts, and I'm not afraid to admit the Mass GOP is probably the worst-run political party in America.
Yeah, in the country, really.
It's got to be. I mean, on either side, can you name any party in any state that's probably worse run than the Mass GOP?
No.
And, I wrote about this in your paper, where if someone runs as a Republican in this state, the first thing they have to do is run against their own party.
Right.
Because if you don't come out on the loud, angry side, then you are a quote-unquote rhino, okay?
Right.
And half your party is going to come out against you. No matter what side you pick, half your party is going to come out against you and do everything they can to undermine you.
Chris Doty actually had a shot at beating Maura Healey.
Absolutely. Of course he could have. Of course he could have.
But the Republican Party wouldn't put him up because, and I'm pro-life. I'm actually more pro-life than anybody. I don't make exceptions for rape and incest. But I say this with love. They couldn't put somebody in there like Chris Doty who didn't care about abortion and was pro-choice.
Wait a minute.
Pro-choice in the first.
He's a Mormon, isn't he? Pro-life?
I thought he was pro-choice up to the first in the first trimester.
Maybe that's what it was. But he's not a rhino.
No, he's not.
He's really not.
No, he's just not a radical right-wing crazy.
Thank you.
Me, I'm a right-wing crazy. But I will vote for a liberal if I think that they're a better candidate.
But you know what the problem is? That he's a nice guy, so he's not loud, he's not angry, so he gets spun as this kind of rhino because he's not, that type, this fire breather type. But he's not. The new chair is Amy Carnevale. She's the same thing, by the way. She gets called a rhino, but she's pro-life. She supported Trump from day one. She's a total Republican, always has been. So how is she a rhino? Right. How is Amy Carnevale a rhino? And here she is, half the party is still working against her. Right. They're going to try to oust her next week, guaranteed. Yep. She's up for re-election this month, and I guarantee you, half the party will try to get it thrown out
It's
of office.
it's the reason I left the Tea Party. It's the reason I left the Democrat Party. You know, I was the MC
that's
for the
right,
Greater
yeah.
Boston Tea Party for 10 years, 15 years, right?
I remember.
So I remember bringing Katie Ives to a Tea Party meeting, and I said, she's a Democrat who's so far to the left that she thinks Elizabeth Warren is too conservative. Okay.
Right.
However,
Right.
Katie Ives wants to propose a measure to put photo ID on EBT cards to stop
There you go.
welfare fraud. This is something we've been crying about as a Tea Party forever.
Yep.
As a Republican Party, we've cried about it forever. She's here to speak tonight about that issue. And you should see the civil war that broke out in that room. She's for abortion. She's for gay marriage.
God,
She thinks Obama's great. Well, wait a minute. She's not here to talk about any of that stuff. She's someone on the other side that can help us achieve what we say we care about. And they threw her out of the fucking room.
Again,
Okay.
worst run party in America for exactly what you just described. It was just self-defeating. It's always
That was the day I walked away.
Squad.
That was the day I walked away. I said, if you guys don't really believe what you say you believe, you're no different than the far left.
Yeah. So
You're
really,
the far left with the opposite view, but that's the only difference.
the party needs to get its act together if they're ever going to, because this is why, Democrats are able to skate to re-election every single year. Most of them don't even have to skate. They just have to have a pulse because they're run unopposed.
Right.
You brought up, I think, Hamilton, right?
Right.
Has a district that a Republican could win.
Easily.
Does anyone even bother to run
No.
against them?
Nope.
I don't think so.
Nope.
And why? Because the party is just still poorly run.
Well, like you said, first you have to win the Civil War.
Yes.
You have to run in a primary, and then, like Richard Tassay, like Scott Brown, if a moderate Republican were to survive a primary in Methuen, and it was a moderate Republican versus Ryan Hamilton, the Republicans in Methuen and Haverhill would vote against him because he wouldn't be conservative enough, and he would never get the votes to get over the hump. Like, for example, they voted against Richard Tassay, so we ended up with Tierney. How did that help? They voted against Scott Brown. They voted against Scott Brown. We got Elizabeth Warren. How did that help?
No, Richard Tassay came within 1% of beating John Tierney. Okay?
Furious.
And it was because, and a lot of guys were not afraid to say it, it's because he's gay and he's married to a man.
Right.
And they just couldn't get over that.
Like
I could not get over that.
I still can't figure out how the hell that makes any difference in anything.
So Tierney won, and then he got defeated by Seth Moulton, who we're going to be stuck with for decades.
I actually supported Richard Tassay because he was a gay man. Because now here's the guy that, as a Republican, they can't come after the Republicans and say you're a bunch of homophobes because we just elected a gay guy married to a guy. Like that's kryptonite right there. The Republican Party should be embracing people like Richard Tassay because he's gay, because it gives you kryptonite. When a black conservative runs for office as a Republican, we should be embracing him no matter how liberal he might be, because you now have insulation against those bogus, you're a racist, you're a homophobe, all the ists that they throw at you whenever you oppose their measures.
Yep. No, it's true. And the same thing
And
happened
you try to explain it to them, but they're just so closed-minded. And I love Jim Lyons to death. I don't want anybody to think I'm rapping him personally.
We all love Jim Lyons.
I love Jim Lyons, and he's right. 100% on the issues, he's right. He's just wrong on strategy, and so is the entire Mass GOP. They're just totally wrong on strategy. No, they're right on the issues, but they're wrong on strategy.
No, it's true. He just lets these things get in the way. I'll never forget the number of people that told me they couldn't vote for Scott Brown because of one vote he took on some gun measure, something about an assault, and that was the one thing. And we tried to tell him exactly what you brought up. All right, if you don't get Scott Brown, you're going to end up with some far left. And sure enough, we got Elizabeth Warren. And she'll be there for as long as she can maintain a pulse, right? She will be the next Feinstein. She'll be wheeled in on a wheelchair. Guaranteed. 100 years old, she'll still keep running, and she'll still keep winning.
I hate to say this out loud, but I'm going to say it anyway. I stood up at the Worcester Tea Party, and the Worcester Tea Party was the absolute best to me. They treated me better than anybody, even though I didn't check all the boxes. So I got up one day and I said, I want to conduct an experiment, and I videotaped it. It's on YouTube somewhere. I said, I want to conduct an experiment. Scott Brown was running against Elizabeth Warren. I said, if you guys don't vote for Scott Brown, because some of you before I came up here told me you weren't going to vote for him, and Elizabeth Warren wins, can you live with yourselves? And you know what they said to the one? You know what they said? Yes, because then we can fundraise off of all her bullshit.
Oh, you got to be kidding me. That's what they said?
That was their answer.
Well, how's that working out for you?
Right. How's that working out for you?
It's been over 10 years. It's been 14 years now. How's that working out? Are they able to fundraise?
So you're right. It's the Democrat. It's the Massachusetts Republican Party that is screwing us by being as fractioned as they are and not seeing the forest for the trees, not looking at the long term. And I love Jeffrey Cooner, but he doesn't help. right? Making nicknames for people and whipping up the hatred and making a cartoon caricature and an enemy of everyone who doesn't vote the way you do prevents them from coming to your side. You know, I told the story about Katie Ives coming to the Tea Party meeting. When she walked out of that meeting, do you think she was more or less susceptible to listening to a Tea Party member who called her office with a concern?
No, she came into the legislature the same time I did. Our board had the same town. Our districts had the same towns. She had Merrimack. I did too. And I didn't know it before I got elected, but she came across as a kind, thoughtful person who would actually listen to people. But coming out of that meeting, no, I bet it's exactly what you said to her. Yep. She comes out of there jaded and probably with a little bit of a chip on her
shoulder. I had to convince her to come.
Yeah.
And she never came back.
I don't
She
blame
never
her.
came back. And I was so furious. That was the day that I said, I'll never be a Republican again. And I'm walking. And that was my very last Tea Party meeting. I never went back to a Tea Party meeting after that.
Started, T stood for taxed enough already.
Right.
They were a fiscal group. They were concerned about dollars and cents because Democrats were
The pro-lifers took it over.
And then the social issue people came into the movement and started diversifying, if you will.
Yep.
And I think you're right, Tom. It was the worst thing they could have done. Listen, there's already groups to deal with abortion or gay marriage, whatever. I
used to tell them that the pro-life group is down the hall.
Absolutely. Listen, taxed enough already is where most people, even in Massachusetts, okay? In Massachusetts, most people that vote for Democrats, they're getting pissed off about the wasteful spending habits on Beacon Hill, and they know it's corrupt, and they know that their money's being squandered. And they would vote for Republicans if they weren't that type that you just described. If they weren't that crazy, loud,
crazy
Tea Party
right
type, they would vote for Republicans. And now the whole party is smeared. So even when we do get good candidates, and listen, we had a great guy running for my old seat. His name was Mark Tajian, businessman, ran a horse farm, nice guy. But you know what? Nice guys can't fit. And it was held against him, the fact that he had an R next to his name. And the image of the Republican Party in the state is horrible. It is in the dumps. It's probably the worst branding of any party in any state.
The Massachusetts Republican Party is the Democrat Party's best marketing tool.
Yeah, exactly.
All they have to do is point to them and go, we're not them. And they win every single election, straight down the line.
That's exactly
The only reason why Charlie Baker was able to win is because he pointed to them too and said, I'm not one of them. And he did it successfully. But otherwise, no Republican can win unless you're in a gerrymandered district.
No, that's exactly right. So in that article I told you about, half the party comes out against you. But the other problem is every newspaper comes out against. And Charlie Baker was able to get in with people at the Globe who kind of gave him a fair shot. They didn't his first time, and he lost to Deval Patrick. People forget that. He lost his first race. But in his next race, he came out.
He lost the first race because his lieutenant governor choice was Richard to say he was a gay man.
Oh, that too.
And the Republicans walked away from him in the final.
Yeah, but the newspapers in his next race kind of gave him a fair shot, and he was very savvy about it. He was very smart to do that, and that made all the difference in the world. If the newspapers give you a fair shot, you can win in a landslide, and Charlie Baker won in a landslide.
We got to wrap it up. We're over, right? Okay. She said it's okay. I know I said we're going to talk about the MBTA Communities Act today. We're not going to have time to do that, so I will do that next week. There is the Valley Patriots on the street. By the way, thank you for your column again. It's always,
all right.
I get a lot of emails about. It's very seldom I get positive emails, but when I get them, it's usually about your column.
All right, glad to hear it.
So
happy to do it.
A lot of people. So maybe we should we wrap? We can wrap it up, right? We're over the. It's just I want to bring it back to Lawrence before we read the sponsors. I, like you, last night was listening to The Wind and thinking about the fact that TMF's outreach team was out there bringing blankets and hot cocoa and hand warmers and sterners to people on the streets. And the fact that the politicians do nothing about it. Although, kudos to Brian DePina and Gregory Del Rosario, the city council, who took my calls and actually did something. There's going to be a warming center tonight. But I laid there and started thinking about all the Democrats who say that they care and the people that are out on the streets. And imagined myself being in a tent in that cold, and imagined myself thinking about it in the terms of while I'm laying here freezing, there's someone who just got here from Guatemala in a luxury hotel, and my government is paying for them to be there, but not me. And it was hard to sleep. It was hard to sleep last night, knowing that was going on. And if the Democrats in Massachusetts did their friggin' job, and did take care of the poor and did take care of the downtrodden, there would be no need for Michael Gorman's TMF.
There you go.
There would be no need for those people to go out and do what they do because there'd be no homeless to feed. There'd be no homeless to bring hand warmers and blankets and sterners to because the Democrats would have taken care of them. And I would become a Democrat. If the Democrats actually believe what they say they believe and did what they said they were going to do, I would be a Democrat. I would support them. The fact that the fact that they don't do that is why I will never be a Democrat. I'll never be a Republican again either after what they've done. But boy, I'll tell you, it would be a lot easier for me to be a Democrat if they actually did take care of the poor, if they did take care of the downtrodden, if they did take care of the homeless. I could see myself being a Democrat, but they care more about the abstract issues that no one gives a shit about because you can't measure their success. Global warming, income inequality. They make up these phrases that are so abstract, you can't measure whether they've succeeded in it or not. So they keep using it year after year, but in the meantime, LA is burning. Lawrence has homeless people sleeping out in the cold. You have homeless veterans who have no food, who have no housing after serving this country, and our politicians on both ends, but mostly Democrats, do nothing about it. Nothing about it, nothing. They line their own pockets. They live in their... Adrienne Ramos lives in her $1 million home in Outcountry in North Andover and doesn't think 1 minute about the poor veteran sleeping in the tent on the banks of the Merrimack and Lawrence. Not even a minute of her time goes to that. So I guess that's it. Thank you, Chrissy. Lenny, thank you for being here. It's always good to. Your insight is really good, and
love doing it.
And I love having you here. You know, if I thought we could get you every month, every week, I would have you on like either once a month or every week if you would come.
Bring it.
I would
MBTA
love to have you.
is the biggest thing, right? Absolutely have us talk about MBTA.
MBTA Act, I wrote a huge 2,000-word column in this Valley Patriot. And I named friggin' names. I named names. And my New Year's resolution is I'm going to be naming names more. So a shame on, you can roll that up, a shame on the Democrat Party, a shame on the Catholic Church, all you churches in Lawrence that preach about Jesus and how Jesus cared about the poor. Your doors weren't open to the poor last night. So if you're one of their parishioners, you should be thinking about going to a different church or maybe starting your own. Because I'm naming them by name, and I'm naming the politicians by name, even some of them are my friends. But if we are not brave enough to do that, if we cower and we don't name names, if we make everything abstract like the Democrat Party, the churches, they're going to keep getting away with doing nothing. So I'm going to leave you with that. I want to thank our sponsors, Stadium Chiropractic, W3ON, Chris's Barbershop in Salem, New Hampshire, Attorney Paul Lambert, Prime Insurance, the Doug Mercurio Law Office, Pleasant Valley Landscaping Contractors, AFC Urgent Care, Clear Path for Veterans New England, Tomo and Shaken Seafood, Bonfire Wellness Center, EIS Investigation and Gun Training, Marston and Son Construction, Century 21, McLennan Real Estate, and the Zanny Pesci Law Office. Thank you, Lenny. Thank you, Christy. And Melvin Taylor says you got to go home. So go home already.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.